My mother told me not to come for Christmas because I would embarrass my sister in front of her boss. She said it like she was protecting everyone from a problem. 4 nights later, I walked into my parents' house anyway, and Paige's boss stood up so fast his chair scraped the floor. "Aaron Caldwell," he said. My mother stopped breathing for a beat. He knew my name before Paige introduced me. That was the first thing. The second was the way he looked from me to my sister after he mentioned a blue ladder chart I had presented at a conference. Paige had used that same chart in the promotion packet, sitting between her and the biggest opportunity of her career. Mom had spent a week making sure I stayed away from the one person who might notice. I was 36 that Christmas, and I lived in Columbus, Ohio. I worked in operations consulting, which is a boring phrase for a job I loved. I went into distribution centers that had stopped working well, found the points where orders got stuck, and helped the people there build a cleaner process. It was practical work, and it was also hard to explain over mashed potatoes. In my family, that had become useful. My mother, Linda, liked jobs she could describe in one sentence. Paige was a client manager at Riverbend Logistics. Mom could tell anyone that Paige handled major accounts and was being considered for a promotion. When people asked about me, she usually said, "Aaron does something with warehouses." I stopped correcting her years ago. Paige was 4 years younger than me. She could walk into a room and know who needed a joke, who needed praise, and who wanted to be left alone. I envied that when we were kids, and I still admired it as adults. What I didn't admire was the way Mom treated every difference between us like a scoreboard. If Paige got an award, Mom framed it. If I got one, she asked whether Paige had heard yet. If I bought my first condo, Mom asked whether I could help Paige find a better apartment. If Paige changed jobs, Mom called it brave. When I changed jobs, she worried that I was never satisfied. None of those things were huge by themselves. Together, they taught me to keep my good news small. For years, I thought that was maturity, and I told myself I was avoiding competition. I stopped mentioning raises, and I stopped sending links when my work was published. I even asked coworkers not to tag me in family-facing posts, because Mom would turn a simple article into a comparison I never wanted. The quieter I got, the easier everyone else seemed to breathe. That was my mistake. Silence can look a lot like permission from the outside. Inside our family, mine became a blank space that other people filled however they wanted. Mom decided I was private because I had less to be proud of. Paige decided I wouldn't care if she borrowed things, and I decided keeping the peace was the same as having peace. The blue ladder chart started as a whiteboard sketch in a distribution center outside Dayton. Orders were getting delayed between shifts because nobody could see where responsibility changed hands, and I drew a simple ladder with each handoff on a different rung. The supervisors hated the name and loved the picture. Within a month, people were using it without needing me in the room. My firm later asked me to turn that project into a public case study. We removed the client's private numbers and details. My name stayed on the work because I had led it. I presented the case at the Midwest Operations Forum that fall. The conference printed the chart in a navy booklet with my name below it in small white letters. I wasn't famous. That matters. Nobody stopped me at airports. Nobody at home should have been expected to know about a trade conference talk, but inside my narrow professional world, the case had traveled. People emailed me about the chart. A few companies asked permission to use it for training, and I liked that because it meant a practical idea had become useful. Paige knew about it because she had asked me for help in October. Her promotion process required a short presentation about how she would improve an underperforming client account. She called while I was unloading groceries and said she needed examples of clear process thinking. I sent her the public link to my case study and told her to look at the structure, not copy the content. "You're the best," she said. "I mean it, Paige." Use the shape of the thinking, don't use the work. I know how jobs work, Erin. She laughed when she said it, and I laughed too. That was another mistake. A week later, she sent me a draft of her promotion packet. I was at the airport after a long client visit, and my flight had been moved twice, and I opened the attachment on my phone. The first page looked polished. The second had a clean list of problems and outcomes. I wrote back, "Look strong, keep it simple when you present." Then I put my phone away. I didn't notice what was buried on the later pages, and I didn't notice because I trusted her. I also didn't notice because I had trained myself not to stare too closely at anything involving Paige's success. Mom had spent years treating my attention like a threat, and I had started doing some of her work for her. By early December, Paige was one of 3 people being considered for a regional team lead role, and she called Mom after every interview. Mom called me after every call. I knew which director had laughed at Paige's joke and which manager had asked about her experience with broken processes. I knew all of that despite never asking. The name that came up most was Daniel Reed. He was Paige's division director, and he would make the final recommendation after the leadership panel gave feedback. He had moved to Columbus that year and didn't have family nearby. Paige invited him to our Christmas Eve dinner after learning he planned to spend the evening alone. Mom loved that idea, and she bought new napkins. She ordered place cards even though there would be 6 people at the table. She called me to ask whether my black dress was still fitted correctly, then acted surprised when I said I planned to wear pants. The dinner had stopped being a family meal in her mind, and it had become an audition. I tried to make a joke of it. "Does Daniel know he's being recruited into a holiday pageant?" "Don't be difficult," Mom said. "This matters to Paige." "I know it matters." "Then act like it." That sentence stayed with me longer than it should have. In our family, acting like something mattered often meant acting smaller so Paige could look bigger. 5 days before Christmas, Mom called while I was finishing notes at my kitchen table. She didn't ask whether I was free. She said, "I need you to do something for your sister." Her voice had that careful softness she used when she had already decided my answer. I leaned back in my chair. "What does she need?" "She needs Christmas to go well." "Okay." Daniel is coming, and Paige is nervous. She has worked too hard for this opportunity to have the night become awkward. I waited. Mom kept going. "I think it would be better if you didn't come." For a second, I thought I had misunderstood her. "To Christmas? Just this year? Because Paige's boss is coming? Because you can be intense, Erin." I actually looked around my empty kitchen as if another person might explain what intense meant. I was planning to bring rolls. That's not what I mean. Of course it wasn't. Mom said I asked too many questions, and she said I had a way of correcting Paige in front of people. She brought up a Thanksgiving from 3 years earlier when I had corrected the name of a city after Paige mixed it up. She brought up a birthday dinner when I said a restaurant reservation was for 7, not 7:30. That was her evidence. Then she said the part that made everything else fall away. Paige finally has a chance to be seen as the accomplished one. I sat very still. "The accomplished one? You know what I mean." "No, I don't," Mom sighed. "Daniel doesn't need to spend dinner wondering why one sister is showing off and the other is trying to keep up." I almost laughed. Instead, I asked, "Which sister do you think is showing off?" There was a pause. "Don't turn this into something ugly." That answer told me enough. Mom tried to soften it after that. She said Dad and I could have lunch after Christmas, and she promised to save me a piece of pecan pie. She said Paige would be able to relax if she knew the evening was safe. Every sentence treated my absence like a thoughtful gift I could give my sister. The strangest part was that I said yes. "Fine," I told her. "I won't come," Mom exhaled. "Thank you." I hung up and stared at the dark window over my sink. My reflection looked more confused than angry. I had spent years telling myself I didn't need Mom to be fair. That night, I realized there was a difference between not needing praise and agreeing to be erased. Still, I didn't call her back, and I didn't call Paige either, and I opened my work laptop because work was the place where facts usually stayed put. I answered 2 emails, and I reviewed a project plan. Then I saw the folder where I had saved Paige's promotion draft. I almost closed the laptop. Instead, I opened the attachment. The first 2 pages were exactly as I remembered them. Paige described a client problem and the way she would communicate with a frustrated customer. It sounded like her. Then I reached the 4th page, and my stomach tightened. There was my ladder. The colors were different. The title was different. The client name was gone because my public case study had already removed it, but the order of the handoffs was mine. The short labels beside each rung were mine. Even the phrase about making ownership visible before asking for accountability was a line I had written for the conference booklet. At the bottom, Paige had written, "Framework developed through prior operational work." No name followed it, and I kept reading. The next page summarized the Dayton project as if Paige had been part of it, and she didn't directly say she had worked at that site, and she used careful language. In a previous recovery effort, we reduced missed handoffs by simplifying shift ownership. The word "we did a lot of work," and I pulled up my public case study beside her packet. The resemblance was not subtle. Anyone who knew the original would notice. Anyone who didn't would reasonably assume Paige had experience she did not have. I thought about Daniel coming to dinner, then I thought about Mom telling me not to come. The question changed right there. This was no longer about my mother preferring Paige, and I needed to know whether Mom was protecting a lie she already understood. I called Paige, and she answered on the 4th ring. "Hey, I'm about to head out. Did you use my case study in your promotion packet?" Silence. Then she said, "I used it as a reference. You copied the latter. I adapted it. You copied the wording under it. I changed the wording." "Paige," her voice sharpened, "what do you want me to say? I want you to tell me what you told the panel." She made a frustrated sound. "I told them I had studied recovery models and used them in account planning. That's not what your packet says. My packet doesn't say I invented anything. It says, we when you describe a project you weren't part of." Another pause. Then she said, "You sent it to me." There it was. "I sent you a public link and told you not to copy the work. I know what you said. So why did you do it?" "Because I needed something concrete, and because you have 100 things like this." I looked at the open file. "I do not have 100 published case studies." "You know what I mean." I did. She meant I could afford to lose one. That was Mom's math too, and I asked Paige whether Mom knew, and she didn't answer fast enough. "She knows," I said. "She knows I used one of your ideas. Does she know Daniel is coming to dinner?" "Obviously." "Does she know Daniel might recognize the work?" Paige went quiet again. That silence landed harder than the copied chart. "Is that why she told me not to come? Mom told you not to come?" The surprise sounded real for about half a second. Then Paige added, "Honestly, that might be for the best." I stood up so quickly my chair rolled backward. "For who?" "Aaron, don't make this dramatic. You used my work to make yourself look qualified for a promotion, and I'm the dramatic one? I am qualified. Then you shouldn't need my project." She lowered her voice. "You don't understand how this place works." I nearly answered with something cruel. I wanted to say I understood exactly how workplaces worked, which was why I had my name on the case study, and she had hidden hers behind the word "we." Instead, I took a breath. "Correct it," I said. "What?" "Tell Daniel and the panel that the Dayton recovery was my project. Tell them you used the published framework as an example. Do it before Christmas." "That's insane." "It's accurate." "You want me to walk into my boss's office and announce that my sister is upset about a slide. I want you to correct the impression you created." Paige's voice changed. The anger gave way to fear. "They could pull me from the promotion. Then you should have thought about that before the panel. Easy for you to say." That phrase had followed me my whole life. Easy for Aaron to say. Easy for Aaron to wait, easy for Aaron to share. Easy for Aaron to step back. If I had something, the family treated it like proof that losing a little more would not hurt me. I gave Paige until Thursday afternoon to fix it. I chose a deadline because I knew what would happen without one. We would talk. She would cry. Mom would call. The issue would dissolve into feelings, and the false packet would remain exactly where it was. I need a message from you when it's done, I said. Paige laughed once without humor. You're giving me a deadline now? Yes, you're unbelievable. No, I'm late. She hung up. Mom called less than 20 minutes later, and I knew Paige had called her first because Mom skipped hello. You threatened your sister. I asked her to correct something false. You gave her an ultimatum before Christmas. I gave her a deadline because she has a deadline at work. Do you hear yourself? Yes. Mom lowered her voice. This is exactly why I asked you not to come. That sentence made the whole thing cleaner. She wasn't afraid I would be rude, and she was afraid I would be present. I asked her one question. Did you know Paige used my case study before you called me? Mom hesitated. Linda, I said, using her name. I almost never did that. She told me she used something you had sent her. Did she tell you she presented the Dayton recovery like she had been part of it? She said you were being territorial about a framework. The word territorial sounded rehearsed. Did you see the packet? I saw some pages. Did you see my ladder? I don't know what your ladder is. You do now. Mom exhaled through her nose. Aaron, this promotion could change Paige's life. And that makes the lie okay? Don't call it a lie. What should I call it? Family helping family. I laughed then. I couldn't help it. Mom became offended by the laugh, and she told me I had always been rigid. She said Paige was trying to grow into leadership, and I should be proud that my work inspired her. She reminded me that Paige had spent years building client relationships. None of that was relevant, which made it more exhausting. I am not saying Paige has no talent, I said. I'm saying she claimed experience she doesn't have. She borrowed a picture. She borrowed the result too. Mom went silent. That told me she had seen more than some pages. I asked her why she had really told me to stay home. Because I knew you'd do this, she said. Do what? Make Paige's night about you. No, I would have eaten dinner. You would have found a way. That hurt more than I expected. Not because it was true, but because Mom needed it to be true. If I was naturally difficult, then excluding me was reasonable. If I was simply there, then she had to admit what she was protecting. I ended the call first. For the next hour, I walked around my condo doing tiny jobs I had been ignoring. I folded towels. I wiped down the stove, and I moved a stack of mail from one counter to another, and I was trying to put my hands on anything that did not belong to this problem. Then Dad called. My father, Mark, was not a man who loved conflict. He could fix a sticking door, assemble a grill without the instructions, and sit through an entire tense dinner while pretending to study the label on a bottle of ketchup. When Mom and Paige collided with me, Dad's favorite phrase was, "Let's not make this bigger." That night he said, "Your mother told me you aren't coming. I was uninvited. She said you decided to skip it." Of course she did. He was quiet. I told him exactly what had happened. I kept it simple. Paige had used my published case study in a promotion packet. Mom knew enough to be worried. Daniel, the person evaluating Paige, was coming to dinner. Mom had asked me to disappear. Dad did not defend her. That scared me a little. Finally, he said, "I didn't know about the work thing." I figured. I thought Linda was worried you and Paige would argue. She was worried we'd tell the truth in the same room. Dad sighed. That's a hard sentence. It's still true. He asked what I wanted. No one in my family had asked me that yet. I want Paige to correct her packet herself, I said. I don't want to call her boss. I don't want her fired, and I don't want a holiday disaster. I want her to tell the truth before someone relies on a fake version of her experience. Dad said, "That sounds fair." I sat down, and it was such a small sentence. I almost cried over it. Then he added, "You should still come for Christmas." I closed my eyes. Dad. It's my house too. That is a conversation you need to have with Mom. I will. No, don't invite me and then let me get turned away at the door. I won't. He sounded more certain than usual, and I wanted to believe him, but I had already made one mistake by agreeing to vanish. I wasn't going to make another by letting Dad's guilt drag me into a showdown before Paige had a chance to fix her own mess. I'll decide after Thursday, I said. Fair enough. Before we hung up, Dad told me he loved me, and he said it every call, so the words were normal. What was different was what came next. I should have asked more questions sooner. That stayed with me. Thursday came slowly, and I went to work. I met with a client team. I explained a tracking problem that had nothing to do with my family. For a few hours, I remembered what it felt like to speak and have people respond to the words I actually said. At lunch, I checked my phone, nothing from Paige. At 2, nothing. At 3:30, I sent one message. Did you correct the packet? She replied 10 minutes later. Handled. That was all. I stared at the word. I wanted to ask what handled meant, and I wanted a screenshot, and I wanted the exact sentence she had used. Then I stopped myself. Paige was an adult, and I had told her what needed correcting. If she said she had done it, I could either accept that or become the private investigator Mom already thought I was. I wrote, "Thank you." Paige sent back a thumbs up worded as thanks. No emoji, no explanation. For the first time all week, my shoulders dropped. I called Dad and told him Paige said it was handled, and he sounded relieved, and he said he had spoken to Mom and made it clear I was welcome at the house. He didn't promise Mom was happy about it. I appreciated that honesty, and I still wasn't sure I would go. That evening, Mom sent a group message about Christmas dinner, and she listed the time, the menu, and where everyone should park because the neighbor expected guests. My name was on the message along with Paige and Dad, then Mom sent me a separate text. Since you've made your point, maybe it would still be kinder to give Paige space this year. I read it twice. Nothing had changed for her. Paige could correct the work, but I was still the danger. I wrote back, I'm deciding for myself. Mom responded, that's what I was afraid of. I did not answer. Friday morning, I was at my desk when Paige called. Her voice was bright, too bright. Quick favor, she said. Do you still have the implementation templates from that handoff project? Every part of me went still. Why? Daniel asked me to sketch how I'd roll the model out across 2 accounts if I get the role. I looked at the wall in front of me. He asked you to do that after you corrected the packet? A pause. Yes. What exactly did you correct? I clarified the source. How? I told him the framework was based on external work. Did you tell him it was my work? Why does my boss need your name? There it was again. Handled had not meant corrected. It had meant softened. I asked, did you tell him you were not part of the Dayton project? Aaron, I am trying to move forward. Did you? She snapped. No one cares about Dayton. Then, why do you need my templates? Paige's breath caught. Daniel had not simply admired a nice chart. He was considering putting her in charge of a real rollout because he thought she understood how the original recovery had worked. The lie had moved from a promotion packet into an actual responsibility. That raised the stakes for me. I could ignore vanity. I could not help someone fake competence that other people would have to work under. No, I said. No what? No templates. You're serious? Completely. I just need the structure. You need to build your own. You know I can do the job. I know you are good with clients. I do not know that you can run this process. Neither do you because you haven't done it. That's what the templates are for. No, templates support experience. They don't create it. Paige was silent for several seconds. Then she said, Mom was right about you. I almost smiled because the line had become so predictable. What was she right about? You can't stand watching me get something. I felt the old reflex rise. Explain, reassure. Tell Paige all the ways I admired her, prove I wasn't jealous. I let the reflex pass. This is not about what you get, I said. It's about what you're claiming. She hung up again. Mom called that afternoon, and I almost let it go to voicemail. Then I answered because I was tired of letting other people decide what our conversations meant. Did you refuse to help Paige? I refused to send her private work files. You already shared the idea. A public case study is not a box of implementation material. You're splitting hairs. No, I'm drawing a line. Mom sounded genuinely angry now. The careful voice was gone. Do you know how many times Paige has supported you? I asked for one example. That was not my kindest moment. It was also not a trick. I wanted to know what Mom believed the balance sheet looked like. She said Paige had come to my housewarming. She had helped pick flowers for my college graduation, and she had defended me when an aunt called me serious. All of those things were true. None of them gave her ownership of my work. I love Paige, I said. I am not giving her files so she can keep pretending she already knows how to do a job. She does know. Then she can build the plan. You make everything a test. No, Mom, her company made this a test. That's what a promotion process is. Mom was quiet. Then she said, "You have always had more room to fail." I had never heard that accusation before. What does that mean? You land on your feet, you always have. I waited, and she told me Paige had been passed over once before. She told me Paige worried she was seen as friendly but not strategic, and she told me the new role would finally prove people had underestimated her. For one brief moment, I understood the fear under Mom's behavior, and she wasn't inventing Paige's insecurity. Paige did have something to prove. Mom had watched her struggle with being taken seriously, and she wanted to protect her from another disappointment. The understanding did not make the choice acceptable. Then help her become strategic, I said. Don't help her impersonate my experience. That's a cruel way to put it. It's an accurate way. Mom said my accuracy was the problem, and I ended the call before we could turn the same circle again. That evening, I pulled the Navy conference booklet from a drawer in my office. I had kept 2 copies after the forum. One was clean. The other was bent at the corners because I had carried it through 3 airports and used it to take notes. My article began near the middle. There was my name. There was the ladder, and there was the paragraph Paige had shortened into her packet. The booklet didn't prove what Paige had said to her boss, but it proved the work existed under my name before her promotion process. I set it on my desk. Then I left it there. I did not plan to carry evidence into Christmas dinner, and I did not want a trap. I wanted to attend my family's holiday without agreeing that my presence was dangerous. Saturday morning, Dad knocked on my door with a paper bag from the bakery near his house. He had 2 cinnamon rolls and the expression of a man who had rehearsed a difficult conversation in traffic. "Peace offering?" I asked. "Bribe?" "More honest." He smiled, but it didn't last, and we sat at my kitchen counter. Dad tore his roll in half and stared at the plate. "Your mother is still mad." I assumed. Paige too. I also assumed. Dad rubbed his thumb over a crumb. "I found something yesterday that I think you should know." My stomach tightened. He explained that Mom had been helping Paige practice answers for Daniel. They had spread notes across the dining table after dinner. Dad had walked through on his way to the garage and heard Mom say, "If he asks, just say Aaron and you have traded ideas for years." I closed my eyes. Dad continued. "Paige said that wasn't exactly true." That surprised me. What did Mom say? "She said sisters don't keep receipts." I laughed once. It came out flat. Dad looked embarrassed. "I should have said something right then." "Why didn't you?" He took a long breath. "Because your mother gets certain when she's scared. I tell myself there will be a better time." Has there ever been? No, that answer mattered. Dad wasn't suddenly brave because he loved me more that week. He was finally admitting the cost of his quiet. Mom's certainty had ruled our family partly because the rest of us kept treating resistance as a worse problem than the thing she was doing. He said he had confronted her after I told him about the copied case study, and he asked whether she had known. Mom admitted Paige had shown her the packet. Dad told her I should never have been excluded. She said I was taking sides, he said. You were. I know. He gave a small smile. Maybe I should have done that sooner too. I asked whether he still wanted me at Christmas dinner. Yes. Even if Daniel recognizes me, Dad looked at me. Especially then. I shook my head. I don't want to walk in there hoping he does. I know. I don't want to humiliate Paige. I know. I don't want you telling yourself later that I caused whatever happens. Dad's face changed. Aaron, I won't. I believed he meant it. I wasn't sure he could keep the promise under pressure. Those were different things. He slid the bakery bag toward me. Come because it's Christmas. Come because you're my daughter. If work comes up, tell the truth. That's all. I looked past him toward my living room. Christmas had always mattered to me more than I admitted, not because of the gifts, and we weren't a fancy holiday family. Dad burned the first tray of cookies almost every year. Mom taped old cards to the kitchen cabinets. Paige and I had matching felt stockings from elementary school that looked ridiculous now. The rituals were ordinary. That was why being excluded hurt. Mom wasn't keeping me away from a glamorous dinner. She was telling me I could lose my chair at an ordinary family table if my presence complicated Paige's image. I told Dad I would come. His shoulders dropped. But I'm not coming early, I said. I'm not helping stage the house. I'm not bringing up work. I'm not cornering Paige, and if Mom tells me to leave, I leave once. I won't stand on the porch negotiating my right to be there. Dad nodded. Fair. Also, I'm bringing the rolls I said I'd bring. He smiled. Your mother bought rolls. Then we'll have too many. For the first time all week, I felt something close to normal. It lasted until that evening. Paige sent me a message with no greeting. If you show up, you're choosing to make this a problem. I read it while standing in line at the grocery store, and I typed 3 different replies and deleted all of them. Finally, I wrote, I am not discussing your promotion at dinner. I also won't lie if I'm asked a direct question. She answered immediately. That's basically a threat. No, it's a boundary. You sound like a training manual. That almost made me laugh. Then another message came, just let me have one night. I stared at those words. They echoed Mom so perfectly that I could see how the whole system worked. My attendance wasn't being weighed against Paige's comfort. My existence was being treated as a resource she could request for herself. I wrote, you already have the night. You don't get my absence too. Paige did not reply. Sunday was Christmas Eve. I woke before my alarm and lay in bed listening to rain tap the window. Columbus had gotten cold but not snowy. The weather made the day gray and ordinary, which felt almost insulting. Part of me wanted the sky to look as dramatic as the week had been. I made coffee. I wrapped Dad's gift. I put Mom's gift in a plain red bag because I had run out of ribbon. I wrapped Paige's gift last. It was a set of ceramic serving bowls she had pointed out in November. I almost left them on the counter. Then I took them. The gift wasn't forgiveness. It was proof that I had planned to show up as a sister long before this became a fight. At noon, Mom called. I let it ring. She called again. I answered. Are you coming? She asked. Yes. Silence. Mark said you might. He invited me. This is exactly what I asked you not to do. Mom, it's Christmas at my parents' house. And I'm your parent too. Then act like it. The words came out before I could soften them. Mom went quiet. I expected anger. Instead, she sounded hurt. You think I've been a bad mother because I'm trying to protect Paige. I think you're asking one daughter to disappear so the other daughter doesn't have to answer for what she did. That is not fair. It's what happened. Daniel is a guest. I don't want tension. Then don't create any. What does that mean? It means I won't mention Paige's packet. I won't mention the conference, and I won't mention the latter. If Daniel recognizes me, I will be polite. If he asks me a direct question, I will answer honestly. Mom's voice went cold. So you're planning to ruin her? No. You know exactly what you're doing. That accusation finally made me angry. No, Mom, you knew exactly what you were doing when you uninvited me. She said my name sharply. I stopped her. I'll be there at 6. You can decide whether I enter as your daughter or leave as the person you tried to hide. That's your choice." I hung up. My hands were shaking, and I stood in my kitchen for a long minute and let them. I left my condo a little after 5:30 with the gifts on the back seat and the rolls beside me, and I had dressed simply. Dark pants, a green sweater, small earrings. No conference badge, no work bag. No Navy booklet, and I wanted there to be no question about why I was going. At a red light, Dad called through the car speakers. "You're still coming? I'm 10 minutes away." "Good," I heard voices behind him. "Is Mom okay?" Dad made a sound that was not an answer. "Mark," I said, "she's tense. Is Paige there?" "Yes, Daniel got here early." That changed the picture in my head, and I had imagined walking in before the guest arrived. I would put the rolls down, hug Dad, survive a cold look from Mom, and settle into the evening. Now Daniel was already inside the house I had been asked to avoid. I almost turned around. Then I remembered Paige's message, "Just let me have one night." If I left, she would learn that pressure worked. Mom would learn it too. Next time, the reason might be smaller, and there was always another reason to ask the person who usually gave way to give way again. "I'm coming," I said. Dad said, "Good," one more time. My parents lived in a brick ranch house on a quiet street 20 minutes from me. I had driven there hundreds of times. That evening, every familiar mailbox felt like part of a route I had suddenly been told I did not own. There were 3 cars in the driveway. Dad's truck was near the garage. Paige's white sedan sat beside it. A dark rental car was parked at the curb, which I assumed belonged to Daniel. I parked across the street. For a few seconds, I stayed in the driver's seat. I could see the warm rectangle of the living room window. Mom had put candles on the sill, the old paper star Paige, and I made as kids still hung in the center. It was crooked, as always. I picked up the rolls and gifts. The rain had become a fine mist. By the time I reached the porch, tiny drops had settled on my hair. Before I could knock, Dad opened the door. "There you are." He took the bakery box from my hands and hugged me. That hug mattered because he did it before checking over his shoulder. "Come in," he said. I stepped onto the mat. Mom appeared from the hallway, and she wore the red blouse she saved for holidays. Her face was composed, but her eyes went straight to the gift bags in my hand and then to Dad. "Mark," Dad said, "she is coming in." Mom looked at me. "Can we talk outside?" "No, Aaron." "It's cold and I'm already here." She lowered her voice. "Daniel came early." "I heard. So you understand why this is not a good time." I almost admired how she could make my arrival at 6 on Christmas Eve sound like a scheduling error. I said I wouldn't bring up work. "You don't have to bring it up. Paige said he went to that conference." My grip tightened on the gift bags. That was new. "When did Paige tell you that?" "Today." Mom glanced toward the living room. She only realized after he mentioned it in the car. I felt my heartbeat in my throat. Paige had known, before I arrived, that Daniel had attended the forum where my work was presented. She had not warned me. She had not corrected the record, and she had asked me to stay home. Mom whispered, "Please, just go. I'll tell everyone you weren't feeling up to it." I stared at her. She had already chosen the lie she would use to explain my absence. "No," her jaw tightened. "Aaron, I am asking you as your mother. And I'm answering as your daughter. You're doing this to punish her. I'm here for Christmas. You know what could happen." "Yes." That was the first time I admitted it out loud. Daniel might recognize me. He might connect the work. Paige's promotion could be affected. Mom might blame me for years. I knew all of that. I also knew I had not copied the packet, invited the boss, or built a family dinner around hiding the person whose work had been used. Dad moved beside me. "Linda, stop." Mom looked at him as if he had broken a rule. "This is not your fight. It's my house and my daughter." "I am also your daughter," Paige said from behind them. We all turned. She stood at the end of the hallway in a cream-colored dress. Her face looked pale with anger. I said, "Hi, Paige." She did not answer. For one strange second, all four of us stood in the narrow entryway with the Christmas tree glowing behind Paige. The moment was so domestic that the tension felt ridiculous, and then a man's voice came from the living room. "Everything okay?" Paige closed her eyes. Mom said too quickly, "Fine." Daniel stepped into view. He was taller than I expected, maybe in his early 40s, with a dark sweater and a glass of water in one hand. He looked from Mom to Paige, then to me. His expression changed. He took one step forward. "Aaron Caldwell." No one spoke. Daniel set his glass on the console table. "I thought that was you." My mother's face lost all color, and I shifted the gift bags to one hand. "Hi," he smiled, genuinely pleased. "Daniel Reed, we never met, but I saw your talk at the Midwest Operations Forum." I saw Paige's shoulders drop. Daniel kept talking. "The handoff recovery case. The blue ladder." There it was. The thing Mom had tried to keep outside had walked into the room with my name attached. Daniel's recognition should have been an ordinary professional moment. In any other house, I would have thanked him and moved on. In my parents' entryway, it felt like someone had turned on a light. "You remember that?" I asked. "Absolutely. We had a handoff problem last spring. Your example was one of the clearest explanations I heard all year." Paige stepped forward. "Daniel, Aaron's my sister." He looked at her. "Wait, this is Aaron?" "Yes." He gave a small laugh. "You never said." Mom cut in. "We try not to talk shop at Christmas." It was almost impressive. Dad took the gifts from my hand and moved us into the living room. Mom offered Daniel another drink. Paige sat on the edge of the couch, and I took the chair nearest the tree and kept both hands in my lap. Daniel asked whether I still used the ladder model. I said the core idea was the same, but every site needed its own version. "That's what I liked about it," he said. "Simple without pretending every operation is identical." Paige stood. "Mom, do you need help in the kitchen?" Mom said yes too fast. They disappeared together. For 10 minutes, Dad and Daniel talked about Columbus traffic and the rain, and I laughed in the right places. The evening almost became what I had wanted. Then Mom called us to dinner. My place card was there. That shouldn't have moved me, but it did. We started eating. Daniel mentioned that his family was out west, so Paige's invitation had saved him from takeout. Mom beamed at her. The room was warm and normal enough to make me doubt the whole week. Then Daniel turned to me. "Did your team ever publish the follow-up to the Dayton case?" My fork stopped. "A short update," I said. "I can send you the public link." Paige said, "I think I have that one." Daniel looked at her. "You do? Aaron sends me work stuff sometimes." "That explains it," he said. Mom reached for the gravy. "Explains what?" Daniel looked at Paige. "Your promotion presentation." I knew the framework felt familiar. You were using Aaron's model. The room went still. Paige smiled with only her mouth. "Parts of it. The ladder and the ownership language." Mom said, "The girls share ideas all the time." Daniel nodded politely. "That's nice." Then he added, "Paige, I didn't realize you had worked with Aaron on a recovery before." Paige froze. The word "worked" changed everything. She said, "Not formally." Daniel waited. "We've talked through a lot of things over the years." That was true in the broadest possible sense. We had talked about jobs, and we had never run a recovery together. Daniel looked at me. "Is that how the Dayton example made it into the packet?" Every face turned toward me. Mom gave me a tiny shake of her head. I put my fork down. "I sent Paige the public case study when she asked for examples," I said. Paige jumped in. "Exactly." I kept going. "I told her to study the structure and not copy the work." Daniel's expression became neutral. Mom said, "This is a family misunderstanding." "No," I said. I turned back to Daniel. "I led the Dayton recovery. Paige was not involved. We did not develop the ladder together." No one moved. Daniel looked at Paige. "Did the panel understand that?" Paige said. "I clarified the source." "When?" "Thursday." "You told me Thursday that the framework came from outside research. You did not tell me the source was your sister's published case study." Paige's eyes filled. Mom reached for her hand. Daniel asked, "Did the panel understand that you had not participated in the recovery?" Paige looked down. That was the answer. Mom said, "She never said she invented it." Daniel's voice stayed even. "Linda, I'm not going to debate this with you." Paige looked at him. "I can explain." "Then explain." She said she had been under pressure to show strategic experience. Her client work was strong, but the panel wanted an example of a broken operation she had helped fix. She had none at that scale. She used my public case because the thinking made sense to her. Daniel listened. Then he asked why her packet said "we" when describing the recovery. Paige called it presentation language. He asked why she described lessons learned from implementation. Paige said she learned them by studying my article. He asked why she wanted responsibility for a rollout based on that example. Paige stopped answering. Mom said, "Because she can do it." Daniel looked at her. "Maybe, but I need to assess Paige based on Paige's experience." Mom turned to me. "Tell him you helped her." Dad shifted beside me. "Linda," she ignored him. "Aaron, tell him you helped with the packet. I sent the public link. You reviewed her draft." My stomach dropped. Daniel looked at me. "Did you?" "I opened it on my phone at an airport." I read the first pages and said they looked strong. I did not read the full packet until this week. Mom seized on it. "So you approved it?" "No, you told her it was strong." "I told her the opening was strong." "How was she supposed to know you hadn't read the rest?" I stared at her. I had skimmed the packet. I had trusted Paige. Mom was trying to turn my carelessness into permission. "I should have read it more carefully," I said. "That was my mistake. It still doesn't make the Dayton work hers." Daniel nodded once. I could own my part without taking ownership of Paige's. Daniel pushed his chair back. "I think we should stop here." Paige whispered, "Am I fired?" "No, I'm not making an employment decision at Christmas dinner." She looked at him. "I'll review the packet and the panel notes after the holiday. The promotion process will pause until I do." Mom's hand moved from Paige's to the table. "Pause? I'll handle it at work." Daniel stood. He thanked my parents for dinner, told Paige they would talk after the holiday, and put on his coat. Before leaving, he turned to me. "It was good to meet you." "You too." He hesitated. "Your presentation was excellent." I wished he had not said it. Mom closed her eyes. Daniel seemed to understand more than he wanted to, and he left without another word. The front door clicked shut. Mom turned on me. "Fix this." "No, email him, tell him this was a misunderstanding." "It wasn't." Paige covered her face. Dad came back from the hall. "Linda, stop." Mom pointed at me. She knew exactly what would happen. I stood. "I knew he might recognize me. And you came anyway." "Yes." "Why?" The answer was so obvious I almost missed it. "Because I'm your daughter." Mom stared at me. "Because this is my family's Christmas too. I did not copy Paige's packet, and I did not invite her boss." "I am not the person who should have to disappear." Mom's eyes filled. "Your sister could lose this promotion." "She might." "You already have a career." The room went still. Mom stepped closer. "You have a good job, people know your work. Why can't you let your sister have this one thing?" There it was, the rule. If I had enough, Paige was entitled to take something from my side of the table. I looked at my mother. "You didn't ask me to let her shine." My voice shook, but I kept going. "You asked me to disappear so her lie could look true." Mom flinched. Paige dropped her hands. Mom said I was trying to protect her. From being judged for something she actually did, from losing a chance she deserves. Then let her earn it. Mom's face hardened. "Family is supposed to help." I did help. I sent her an example. She turned it into a credential. "You are so cold." That word used to work on me. I picked up my coat. "No, I'm done being useful only when I make myself smaller." Paige stood. "Aaron, wait." I looked at her. "Did you know he went to the forum before today?" I asked. She nodded. "When?" "This morning." "And you still asked me not to come." Another nod. "Did you plan to tell him the truth?" Paige looked at Mom. That was enough. Mom said, "If you walk out now, don't expect me to chase you. I stopped asking you to chase me years ago." I put on my coat. "I won't come back to a holiday where my invitation depends on whether I'm convenient. You can be angry, I'm not negotiating that." Mom crossed her arms. "So now you're punishing us." "No, I'm changing what I participate in." The wrapped serving bowls for Paige were still under the tree. I left them there. Dad walked me to the door and hugged me. Behind him, Mom was crying at the table. Paige was staring at the floor, and I stepped into the cold rain. For once, I did not turn around to see whether anyone was following. I drove home with the radio off. At the first red light, I cried hard enough that I had to wipe my face with the sleeve of my coat. I wasn't crying because Paige's promotion had paused, and I was crying because Mom had finally said the rule out loud. "You already have enough, so your loss should not count." Dad texted when I got home. "You safe?" I wrote. "Home." He replied, "I love you, you were right to come." I read that message several times. Paige did not contact me that night. Mom sent one text. "I hope you're proud of yourself." I deleted it without answering. The Monday after Christmas, Daniel sent a short email to my work address, which was listed on the public case study. He said he was reviewing Paige's promotion materials and asked whether I could confirm two facts. Had I led the Dayton recovery? Had Paige worked on it with me? I answered yes to the first and no to the second, and I included the public case study link. Nothing more. I did not speculate about Paige's motives, and I did not ask what would happen, and I did not send screenshots of family texts. The facts were enough. 2 weeks later, Paige called, and I let it ring once, then answered. "I didn't get the promotion," she said. "I'm sorry." She gave a bitter laugh. "Are you? I am sorry you lost something you wanted." That's a very Aaron answer. Probably. She was quiet, then she told me Riverbend had kept her in her current role. The review found that parts of her promotion packet overstated her involvement in the recovery example. She received a formal warning and had to submit a corrected portfolio before applying again. That consequence felt fair to me, and it was serious without ending her career. Paige said Daniel had also told her something she hated hearing. He said my actual client work was good enough to make me competitive. I closed my eyes. Then, why did you use mine? I thought good enough wasn't enough. There was no dramatic excuse after that, and she admitted she had been afraid of being passed over again. She admitted Mom had encouraged her to make the example sound personal because everyone sells themselves. She also admitted she had wanted that permission. "I let Mom make you the problem," Paige said. "Yes. I was angry that your name could walk into a room and undo what I had built." I took a breath. "My name didn't undo it. I know." That was the first real apology she gave me. Not "I'm sorry you were hurt." Not "I'm sorry this got messy." She said, "I used your work, and then I tried to keep you away so no one would notice. I'm sorry." I thanked her for saying it, and I did not tell her everything was fine. We agreed to meet for coffee later that month. We talked for an hour about ordinary things before either of us mentioned Christmas. That felt healthy. It also felt fragile. Trust did not come back because she apologized once. But for the first time, Paige was rebuilding it without asking me to pretend nothing had happened. Mom was different. She called 3 times in January. Each call began with some version of, "I don't want to fight." Each call ended when she explained why I had forced her into an impossible position. I stopped arguing. I gave her one boundary. "I will not attend a family holiday where you can uninvite me to protect Paige, then blame me for showing up." Mom said that would never happen again, and I asked her to acknowledge that it had happened once. She couldn't, so I stopped going over there for a while. Dad came to my condo for lunch. He brought tools I did not need and fixed a cabinet hinge that was not broken enough to require him. It was his way of showing up without speeches, and he also stopped carrying messages between Mom and me. That was new behavior, and I noticed it. By spring, Paige and I were speaking regularly again. She built her own process proposal for a difficult account and asked whether I would review the wording. I told her I would look at clarity, not content. "Deal," she said. The proposal was hers, and I made 3 small comments and sent it back. That exchange meant more to me than any apology. The next Christmas, I did not wait for an invitation from Mom. I hosted dinner at my place. Dad came. Paige came with dessert. 2 close friends joined us. Mom chose not to come because she said she was not ready to be treated like a guest in her daughter's home. I told Dad not to argue with her. There was an empty place at the table for about 5 minutes. Then one of my friends moved the extra chair against the wall, and we ate. Before dinner, I found an old Christmas card in a box of ornaments. Mom had written it to me when I was in college. "There will always be a place for you here." I stood in my kitchen holding that card for a long time. Then I set it beside my plate, not because I wanted to mock her, because I finally understood the difference between being given a place and building one. A place someone can remove whenever your presence becomes inconvenient is not security, it is permission with conditions. My table was smaller than my parents' table. It was also mine. No one there needed me to hide my work, lower my voice, or stay home so someone else could look taller. And that was the first Christmas I can remember when I did not spend any part of the night trying to make myself easier to love. If your family asked you to disappear to protect someone else's lie, where would you draw the line?